I am here to introduce our I am here to introduce our research person for this session, and our research person is Dr. P.G. Wankade sir. He is head of Department of Economics in Punyashlok Ahilyadevi Holkar Solapur University, Solapur, and he has published more than 50 papers at the level of national international conferences in various years. So after the paper publication, he also worked on research project which was sponsored by the government of Maharashtra as well as government of India. The number of research papers completed by the Wankhede sir is 4, and he also guiding the various students from Maharashtra and India for the PhD, and also published in Indian Gazette one patent, and also he published 2 books in the academic field. So we have eminent personality in academic field today in this session. So I will further schedule hand over to the organizing committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I welcome you, sir, Dr. Wankhede, sir. Are you connected with us, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Uh, we
May I
are,
audible?
yes, sir, you are audible. You are
Okay.
audible, sir.
Ah, ah.
Uh,
Can we start now?
yes, sir, we can start. But before we start, can you share a few words on this conference, sir?
Okay.
On paper
First of all,
presentation.
I would like to congratulate the college for organizing such international conference where more than 100 participants are online for this conference. I think this is a huge response from the academics, and I wish best luck for the all research participants who are going to present their research paper in this conference. Shall we start now? Because already we are
Yes, sir.
okay.
Dear all research scholars, pay attention. I'm going to call the names of the research scholars who are presenting their paper. And we have already circulated the message that you will be given only 5 minutes for your presentation. And in that, you will either present by orally or PPT. If you are presenting your research paper by PPT, then please be ready with your PPT. Now, the first research scholar we have with us, uh, they are jointly presenting their paper, Ms. Poonam Pandita, Mr. Sachin Kumar, and Ms. Chetna Suri from Central University of Jammu, Samba, Jammu and Kashmir. The research paper name is Women Empowerment, an essential way to achieve the goal of social development. Poonam Pandita, Poonam Pandita ma'am, are you there?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Sir, am I audible?
Please continue with your.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Please continue with your paper presentation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for introducing us. So, I am Poonam Pandita, teacher educator from the Central University of Jammu, Department of Educational Studies. Today, I am here to present the joint paper whose co-authors are Mr. Sachin Kumar and Chetna Suri. So, the title of our paper is Women Empowerment, an Essential Way to Achieve the Goal of Social Development. So, as we all know, women are the primary foundation for building a progressive society. They play a key role for strengthening and developing our nation, but in some parts of our country, their role is still limited to the household chores, and still they become the victim of domestic violence and social evils. Their
Ma'am, can you
freedom is,
start your video, please? Can you start your video?
that there is a network issue. So, if we start my video, then my voice will fluctuate.
Yes, continue, ma'am. Continue.
Sir, shall I continue?
You continue, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, continue.
Okay, okay, sir. So women play a key role for strengthening and developing our nation, but in some parts of our country, their role is still limited to the household chores, and still they become the victim of domestic violence and social evils. Their freedom is still restricted, and they lack the opportunity to put their ideas before others. So there is a great need of women empowerment, which doesn't only mean to educate the female child, but it also means to uplift and improve women's social, economic, and political lives, and involving them in decision making, recognizing their potential, raising their status, and developing their skills through technical and vocational education. Because women are bestowed with the same abilities, capacities, strength, and power as the men are bestowed, but still they face discrimination. Here I want to share one example. फॉर एग्जाम्पल हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी में जब कोई भी प्रोग्राम या कोई भी वेबिनार ऑर्गेनाइज किया जाता है तो जो वर्क है वो सेपरेटली गर्ल्स और बॉयज में डिवाइड कर दिया जाता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल
You are not audible, ma'am.
हेलो.
Yes, ma'am. Continue.
हेलो.
Yes, ma'am. You are audible. Continue with your paper.
Okay, okay, sir. If we talk about Vedic age, in Vedic age itself, we can see the prevalent gender inequality when there is no right to education to women. They were denied to have education from the gurus. They didn't get admission in the ashrams. So the tradition of gender inequality or discrimination against women had started from the ancient era. If we talk about India, in India, there are basically three categories of families in India in relation to the awareness of gender empowerment. First of all, there are the families who still believe that there is no need to teach.
Ma'am, unmute your.
Hello. Hello.
You are audible, Poonam.
Okay, okay. So there
Yes,
are
ma'am.
some
Continue.
So there are some challenges that come in the way of women empowerment. First of all, resistance to the women as superior. Secondly, stereotype thinking and prejudice against women is also one of the important challenges in the way of women empowerment. Thirdly, the psychology of the society is the biggest hindrance in the way of women empowerment. Fourthly, sexual harassment is also the challenge that compels parents to restrict their female child. Then labeling the work on the basis of gender is the biggest hindrance in the way of women empowerment. Narrow-minded thinking of the society creates a bridge on the way of women empowerment. Then resistance to appreciate the women roles in the society is also the biggest hindrance in the way of women empowerment. Now I want to give some suggestions that can help us to overcome it. First of all, we should consider household work as life skills and not to label the household work on the basis of gender. We should not try to build character and values among women, but we should also focus to build these values among men so that the fear of sexual harassment doesn't restrict the female child's freedom. We should perceive every human as a human. We should not see the humans into fragments. This will also change our stereotype thinking related to the women. Then start empowering the women from your home itself. Doesn't wait for others to take a step. Understanding the fact that women also share the equal burden as men share, then don't restrict the women thinking their voices even from the childhood. Teach your female child to speak and to raise their voice when it's necessary. Don't hesitate to appreciate the women and to listen to their voice. Provide skill and technical education to women. Welcome their economic participation and don't validate her on the basis of their color or background. And try to aware people about gender issues and about the importance of women empowerment. At last, I want to conclude that women empowerment doesn't only refer to educating the girl child, but it's a broad term with a broad meaning. It means treating them in the way that they don't need to feel about their empowerment. It means to respect their decisions, to give them equal opportunities, to enhance their skills, and to involve their participation in every sphere. In India, women empowerment can be seen differently on the basis of various factors like geographical factors, socio-economic factors, and cultural factors, and so on. In India, every region is on the different ladder on the way of women empowerment. India is a developing country and is trying to overcome from various problems. So if we talk about women empowerment, India is still struggling to overcome from the challenges of women empowerment. There is a need of some time to achieve the complete goal of women empowerment. There is the need to change the attitude of people regarding women empowerment, because women empowerment is the only way which can lead our country to better heights. Thank you, sir. That was all from my side.
The second person we have Ananda Kasle sir, GJ Advani Law College, Mumbai. Research paper title is Legal Education in India with reference to changing facets of society.
Thank you, sir.
You
May I
start
audible?
your presentation. Yes, sir. You are
May I
audible.
audible? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I am Dr. Anand Mahadev Kasle from GJ Advani Law College, Mumbai, and title of my research paper is Legal Education in India with reference to changing facets of society. In this my paper, I am talking about legal education plays a vibrant role in conveying societal modification. As we are all aware that law governing the society and that awareness and spirit of law comes from the legal education. It prepares the individual to comprehend the particular civilized society. Legal education is a classes of foremost education in all the education. It indicates the aptitude to make use of law, to analyze it, and to disparage it as a member of legal community. It emphasizes on the specific freedom as also on the development of the society. Regarding the legal education and law, I want to quote the particular quotation of the Constitution maker of India, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, that law and order are the medicines of the body politic, and when the body politic gets sick, medicine must be administered. Legal education and its importance to establish rule of law in society to convey justice does not receive stern precedents through one can easily study history of modern times, which shows that lawyers are social scientists who gave leadership to nations. Legal education is a kinds of central education comparing to other education. It teaches the competence to make use of law, to analyze it, and to disparage it as a member of legal community. It emphasizes on the discrete self-determination as also on the growth of society, cohesion, and solidification of rule of law. The movement of high superiority legal education is a precondition to great superiority legal practitioners. Law is the protector and vindicator of rights and freedom. Legal education involves the education of law commonly to lawyers before entry into legal profession. Law of a society is the regular of its societal standards, the essentials to evaluate and review the prospectus and methodologies of law courses with promotion to the particular contents of the legal syllabus. Legal education may serve the society by communicating to law students general and culture of the education which is required in that terms. Now I'm moving towards the legal education system in India. Usually, universities in India offered legal education as 3 years course as well as 5 years course. The eligibility requirement for the bachelor's of law, that is LLB, was that the applicant already has a bachelor's degree in any subject from a recognized institution and common entrance test, that is CET. Now, legal education is overall influenced by the globalization also. So new upcoming branches are coming into legal education, as well as there is we can say some pitfalls and hindrance also in legal education, that is related to the easy admission in legal course, as well as we can say the teaching faculties and teaching methods. In terms of the particular teaching faculties, there is a scarcity of qualified, especially the UGC prescribed NET qualified, and now after the new provisions, that is a PhD also in universities, that is a scarcity in the faculty wise in legal education. As well as the examination system is a little bit defective examination system, which is not overall evaluating the skills and knowledge of the students of law. As well as there is a vast difference among legal institutions or law educational institutions, where it is varied from institution to institution. The educational culture, the teaching culture, the infrastructure culture of the particular educational institutions. Overall, there is so many, we can say, requirement to change the legal education. In short, I am suggesting certain suggestions that the appropriate steps should be taken for overall development of the legal education, as well as the Bar Council of India should become more vigilant about the colleges and their infrastructure and full-time faculties, as well as the case study method must be compulsory for evaluating the students. Necessary amendments are required in terms of the particular syllabus upgradation, as well as the more and more number of students who willing to participate in moot courts, mock trials should be encouraged within the college campus. Along with that, the practical skills also required. Now I'm directly coming to conclusion that globalization of legal education is very important, and therefore our Indian legal education must be connected in a global manner. There is a need to subsidize the particular things which is adverse to the legal education, as well as to encourage the legal education within the society. Awareness is required, training, more and more training programs are required. And for this, my paper, I took the help of the various references, among them A. Lakshminathan, that is Legal Education, Research and Pedagogy, Abhilash Anand, as well as the report of Law Commission 1484 report of Law Commission, SP Sate on access to legal education and legal profession, Advocates Act 1961, as well as the UGC release guidelines also. मला फार आनंद होतोय आज कणकवली कॉलेजमध्ये माझा रिसर्च पेपर लीगल एज्युकेशन कायद्याच्या शिक्षणावर प्रेझेंट करताना. कणकवली आचरा रोडवर माझे गाव आहे चिंदर गावठाणवाडी, आणि हे माझं मूळ गाव आहे. आणि मी आयोजकांचे, विशेषतः कणकवली कॉलेजच्या आयोजकांचे आभार मानतो की मुंबईत राहून माझ्या कणकवलीमध्ये मी माझा रिसर्च पेपर प्रेझेंट करू शकलो. आणि मनाने जरी मी मुंबईत, शरीराने मुंबईत असलो तरी अजूनही मला आमच्या कणकवली आचरा रोडवर असलेल्या चिंदर गावाची, गावठाणवाडीची आठवण येते. आणि थँक्यू व्हेरी मच फॉर गिव्हिंग मी अपॉर्च्युनिटी to present my research paper on legal education in the Kankavli College International Online Conference. Thank you very much to organize this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Next research scholar
Vijay
we
sir.
have.
Sir, Vijay sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
I'm just, you suggest the paper presenter, what they are doing, just they are reading. We don't need that kind of presentation. What we need, what are the objective of that research paper, what methodology they have followed, and what new thing they have find in that research paper.
Yes, sir. You suggest them.
That, you just
Wanted,
suggest.
sir. Okay.
Huh.
Sir, you can
Okay.
also speak. You speak.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I just request all participants, when they are reading their research paper, just they describe what are the objectives, what methodology they have used, what kind of new thing they have find while they are preparing that research paper. These kind of things we need to discuss in that platform, in this platform. So I request remaining participants just go with these points. Thank
I
you.
hope all the research scholars have understood the point made by our Dr. Wankhede, sir. Now, next participant, research scholar we have, Mr. Ramchandra Gaikwad from Pansare Mahavidyalaya, Arzapur, Solapur.
नाही सर सोलापूर सर नांदेड सर
Nanded.
सर प्लीज नांदेड सर
Yes,
प्लीज
sorry, sir. From
Direction, sir.
Nanded.
Nanded, sir, from.
Title of research paper is Literature and Movement.
येस सर
To start
Thank
your
you, sir.
presentation.
ओके सर कणकवली कॉलेज कणकवली या ठिकाणी जे आंतरराष्ट्रीय चर्चासत्र या ठिकाणी आयोजित करण्यात आलेलं आहे त्यामध्ये मी माझं साहित्य आणि चळवळी या संदर्भाने माझं रिसर्च पेपर या ठिकाणी सादर करणार आहे. साहित्य समाज प्रबोधनाच्या दृष्टीने समाजाची मशागत करीत असतील म्हणून ज्या काळामध्ये सामाजिक परिवर्तनाच्या चळवळी झालेल्या असतील त्याची निसंकोचपणे व निपक्षपातीपणे नोंद घेतली गेली असेल तर ती एका दृष्टीने भविष्यकालीन एकसंघ व एकजीव समाजाची बांधणी व राष्ट्रबांधणीच्या उपयोगी पडत असते आणि जर ती नोंद योग्य वेळी घेतली गेली नसेल तर समाज एका चांगल्या विचाराबरोबरच कलाकृतीला पण मुकत असतो. इतिहासाच्या प्रत्येक वळणावर घडून गेलेल्या घटनापासून समाज जर अनभिज्ञ राहिला तर समाजात काही विघटनकारी उपप्रवृत्ती बळावत जातात. परिणामी वर्तमान स्थितीमध्ये इतिहासाचे विकृतीकरण घडवून आणून समाजाला आपापसात दुभांगले जाते. ही कधीही भरून न येणारी समाजाची हानी होत असते. म्हणून इतिहासाच्या प्रत्येक टप्प्यावर न दुर्लक्षिता ज्या समाज हितैषी चळवळी होत असतात त्याची नोंद घेतली तर चळवळीसाठी सकस साहित्याची निर्मिती होत असते. 1919 ते 1956 या काळात डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर यांचा एक झंझावात भारतामध्ये समाज बदलाच्या संदर्भात चालू होता. तो झंझावात दलित मुक्तीची चळवळ होती. या झंझावातात फक्त साहित्याच्या स्वरूपामध्ये नव्हता तर प्रत्यक्ष कृती कार्यक्रमही होता. त्यांनी आपल्या कार्याचा आरंभ बहिष्कृत हितकारणी सभेच्या माध्यमातून केलेला होता. त्यांच्या कार्याचे स्वरूप आंदोलनाची गरज म्हणून साधन स्वरूपामध्ये संघटना व नियतकालिक असे होते आणि या पार्श्वभूमीवर महाराष्ट्र सत्याग्रह ते धर्मांतराची चळवळ धम्मचक्र प्रवर्तन हा चळवळीचा एक मोठा पल्ला आहे. हिंदू समाज व्यवस्थेच्या विरुद्ध चालवलेल्या दलितांचा मुक्ती लढा हा खऱ्या अर्थाने मानवमुक्तीचा लढा होता. 19व्या शतकात भारतात घडून आलेल्या राजकीय व सामाजिक चळवळीत दलितांच्या प्रश्नाची दखल घेऊन कोणी आवर्जून घेतली गेली नव्हती. त्यामुळे दलित मुक्ती लढ्यातील डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर यांच्या सोबत योगदान दिलेल्या दलितेतरांच्या सहभागांचे आजवर स्वतंत्रपणे व चळवळीच्या व इतर अभ्यासकांनी घेतलेले आढळत नाही. विजय सुरवाडे लिखित संपादित समकालीन सहकार्यांच्या आठवणीतील डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर या ग्रंथात दलितेतरांच्या तळटिपांच्या संदर्भात उल्लेख करण्यात आला. तर कवी योगीराज बागुल वाघमारे यांचा एक ग्रंथ दलित चळवळीतील दलितेतरांचे योगदान नुकताच प्रकाशित झाला परंतु स्वतंत्रपणे चरित्राच्या स्वरूपामध्ये लिखाण झाले नाही. त्यामुळे सामाजिक परिवर्तनाच्या चळवळीला पूरक साहित्य उपलब्ध झालेले नाही ही एक फार मोठी शोकांतिका आहे. म्हणून मी माझ्या या निबंधाच्या माध्यमातून मान्य करत असताना की डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर यांच्या चळवळीच्या संदर्भाने जे काही लिखाण झालेलं आहे परंतु ज्यांचं या चळवळीमध्ये योगदान झालेलं आहे त्या योगदानाचं जे काही मूल्यमापन स्वतंत्रपणे व्हायला पाहिजे ते झालं नाही. म्हणून मी या रिसर्च पेपरच्या माध्यमातून की जे या चळवळीत सहभागी आहेत परंतु त्यांचं योगदान लिखित स्वरूपामध्ये जे काही व्हायला पाहिजे झालं नाही ते शोधण्याचा प्रयत्न या ठिकाणी मी या निबंधाच्या माध्यमातून केलेला आहे. डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकरांना शूद्रांच्या मुक्तीचे कार्य करीत असताना विविध पातळ्यावर अविरत प्रयत्न करावे लागले. यासाठी त्यांनी बहिष्कृतकरणी सभा, मूकनायक, बहिष्कृत भारत, महाराष्ट्र सत्याग्रह, काळा मंदिर परिवेश आंदोलन, पुणे करार, जनता, स्वतंत्र मजूर पक्ष, शेड्यूल कास्ट फेडरेशन, संविधान सभेतील कार्य आणि धर्मांतर अशा विविध पातळ्यावर आघाड्यावर कार्य करावे लागले आहे. हेच खऱ्या अर्थाने अस्पृश्यांच्या मुक्ती संग्रामांचे मूलस्रोत आहेत. वरील सर्व आघाड्यावर शूद्रांच्या अस्पृश्यांच्या मुक्ती लढ्यात डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर एकटे नाहीत. ज्यांच्यासाठी हा लढा संपूर्ण देशभर चालवला गेला तो समाज शतकानुशतके अन्याय अत्याचार सहन करीत सामाजिक बंधनात जखडून अज्ञात कितपत पडला होता. यामुळे या समाजातून सहकार्य मदत म्हणजे दगडावर डोके आपटून रक्तमंबाळ होण्याचा प्रकार होता. म्हणून त्यांनी चालवलेल्या या चातुर्ण्य व्यवस्थेविरुद्धच्या शूद्र अस्पृश्यांच्या मुक्ती लढ्यात काही दलितेतर सहभागी झाले होते, जे जन्माने उच्च कुलीन आहेत. ज्यात प्रामुख्याने रावसाहेब बोले, आचार्य दोंदे, भाई अनंत विनायक चित्रे, भाई सुरुवात टिपणीस, गणी उर्फ बापूसाहेब छत्रबुद्धे, डी.व्ही. प्रधान, भास्कर कदरेकर, देवराव नाईक, हिंदू धर्माभिमानी श्रीधर टिळक, प्रबोधनाथ ठाकरे, भाईशेठ वडके, प्राचार्य मोबी चिटणीस, नवलम भत्तेना, कमलाकांत चित्रे, भाई माधवराव बागल आदींचा समावेश या चळवळीमध्ये होता. तत्कालीन परिस्थितीमध्ये डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर यांच्या सोबत राहून शूद्रांच्या चातुर्वर्ण्य व्यवस्थेतून मुक्त करण्यासाठी कार्य करणे सोपे व सहज नव्हते. तत्कालीन समाज हे कदापि सहन करणार होता. असे असतानाही त्यांनी या लढ्यात स्वतःला झोकून दिले होते. त्यांना उच्चवर्णीय समाजाच्या रोषाला किती प्रमाणात सामोरे जावे लागले याची कल्पना आपण करू शकत नाही. डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकरांनी चालवलेल्या शूद्रांच्या दलित मुक्ती लढ्यात दलितेतरांनी जी कामगिरी केली ती आजवर फक्त दलित चळवळ म्हणून प्रसिद्ध आहे. या दलित चळवळीच्या संदर्भाने जे लेखन झाले त्यात त्यांच्या कार्याच्या संदर्भाने चरित्रात्मक स्वरूपात स्वतंत्रपणे कोणीच दखल घेतली नाही. चांगदेव खरमुळे लिखित डॉक्टर भीमराव रामजी आंबेडकर चरित्र खंड 1 ते 12, सुरवाडे विजय संपादित पत्रव्यवहार डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर खंड 1 व 2, समकालीन सहकार्याच्या आठवणीतील डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर या पुस्तकात अत्यंत त्रुटक स्वरूपामध्ये लेखन करण्यात आलेले आहे. त्यांच्या कार्याची व त्यांनी घडून आणलेल्या परिवर्तनाची चळवळ आजपर्यंत कोणत्याच लेखकांनी व संशोधकांनी व्यापक स्वरूपात घेतलेली नाही. या पार्श्वभूमीवर अनंत विनायक चित्रे यांच्यावर त्यांच्याच मुलाकडून त्यांच्या मृत्यूनंतर लिहिलेले वेगळ्या वाटेचा प्रवासी अनंत विनायक चित्रे उर्फ भाई चित्रे हे अक्षर प्रकाशन मुंबई यांनी प्रकाशित केलेले चरित्र सामाजिक चळवळीच्या अभ्यासक व कार्यकर्ते यांच्यासाठी एक मैलाचे दगड ठरले तर ते नवल ठरावे असे आहे. अनंत विनायक चित्रे यांचा डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकरांनी चालवलेल्या शूद्रांच्या दलित मुक्ती लढ्यातील महाराष्ट्राच्या 14 तळावळी सत्याग्रहात भाई अनंत चित्रे आघाडीचे वीर होते. स्वतंत्र मजूर पक्षाची स्थापना व या पक्षाला अस्पृश्य समाजापुरते मर्यादित न ठेवता अस्पृश्यतर श्रमजीवी वर्गाचे प्रतिनिधित्व करावे यासाठी व्यापक स्वरूप प्राप्त करून देण्यात चित्रे भाई यांचे मोलाचे योगदान राहिलेले आहे. म्हणून त्यांनी 1937 ची मुंबई प्रांतिक विधिमंडळाची निवडणूक रत्नागिरी जिल्हा उत्तर विभागातून लढवली होती. जनता पत्राचे संपादक भास्कर कदरेकर असले तरी एकूण 23 अग्रलेख जे आहेत चित्रे यांनी लिहिलेले होते. तर डॉक्टर आंबेडकर यांनी चालवलेल्या होती विरुद्धच्या चळवळीत भाई चित्रे यांनीही हिरारीने भाग घेतलेला होता. म्हणून वेगळ्या वाटेचा प्रवासी हे चरित्रात्मक पुस्तक पुन्हा एकदा जात्यांध धर्माभिमानी झालेल्या लोकांसाठी एक प्रेरणा देणारे आहे. शरद अनंत विनायक चित्रे लिखित वेगळ्या वाटेचा प्रवासी हे चरित्र एकूण 213 पेजेसचे आहे. त्याची सुरुवात कविवर्य बी यांच्या फुलांची वंजळ या कविता संग्रहातील तीव्र जाणीव या कवितेच्या ओळीने केलेली आहे. या ओळी आजच्या संदर्भात फार सूचक आहेत. त्या ओळी अशा आहेत का ब्राह्मणवाद नित्य आमुच्या मार्गी पडे आडवा याचा सारा विचारबोध अजूनही आम्हा नको का व्हावा. नाना धर्म युमोह निर्मुती जन केले निसर्गच्युत ती कालोपाहता समाज घटना कामान ये सांप्रत. शरद अनंत विनायक चित्रे यांनी आपल्या वडिलांविषयीचे चरित्र त्यांच्या मृत्यूनंतर डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर यांचे एकनिष्ठ सहकारी मुंबईचे माजी महापौर डॉक्टर पी.टी. बोराळे यांच्या आग्रहाखातर लिहिलेले आहे असे त्यांनी या चरित्रात उल्लेख केलेला आहे. भाई चित्रे यांचा जन्म त्यांच्या आजोळी 1 मे 1884 रोजी दापोली येथे झाला. त्यांचे प्राथमिक शिक्षण पोलादपूर दापोली महाड येथे झाले तर महाविद्यालयीन शिक्षण पुण्यात फर्ग्युसन कॉलेज व मुंबईतील विल्सन कॉलेज मध्ये झालेले आहे. शरद अनंत चित्रे या चरित्रात असे लिहितात की बाबांचा मुंबईतील वास्तव्यात अनेक चांगल्या व्यक्तीशी आणि पुरोगामी विचारांचा सामाजिक सुधारकांशी संबंध आला. त्यावेळी मुंबईतील
गायकवाड सर
हा बोला.
समाप्त करा थोडक्यात सांगा.
म्हणजे थोडक्यामध्ये की बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर यांनी जे दलित मुक्ती लढा जो चाललेला होता त्यामध्ये कोकणातीलच महाड येथील जे काही सहकारी होते त्यामध्ये अनंत विनायक चित्रे यांचं योगदान जे आहे ते अत्यंत मोलाचं राहिलेलं आहे. आणि बाबासाहेबांच्या सहवासामध्ये या सर्व व्यक्ती आल्यामुळं त्यांना महाडचा सत्याग्रह असेल, नाशिकचा 14 सत्याग्रह असेल किंवा होतीरूचा लढा असेल, हे त्यांना यशस्वीपणे या ठिकाणी राबविता आला. आणि यामध्ये या दलित लोकांचं योगदान खूप मोलाचं राहिलेलं आहे, हे मला या ठिकाणी नमूद करायचं आहे. धन्यवाद. थँक्यू सर.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I request the remaining participants should restrict the research paper by considering their time slot, because you have to present your research paper within 5 minutes. So you highlight the main points. Don't read all the research paper. Go with bullet point, that is objective research methodology, whatever data analysis you had did, that things you have to discuss in your paper presentation. Not go with we don't need, that is all these things. Okay, thank you.
Research scholars who are presenting papers, please follow the suggestions given by the chairperson of this session, Dr. Wankade sir. Please cover all the points which he suggested to present in your paper, and please follow the time limit. You have only 5 minutes for your paper presentation. Please, the next participant we have Ishita Goyal, Christ deemed to be university. The research paper is, the title of the research paper is Subjective Well-being and Coping Strategies in People Who Worked from Home and Had to Go to their office during quarantine, a comparative analysis. Ishita Goyal, ma'am.
Can I present my paper? Like, can I present my paper?
Yes, ma'am, you go ahead.
So, there's some background noise. There's some background noise. Okay. So, yeah. So, introduction. So, when the first cases of COVID was seen in December, and it spread rapidly in March and April, and by that time the virus was contagious and deadly, and a nationwide lockdown was put into force. The lockdown meant that people had to stay inside and close their businesses or be with the families. The consequences of lockdown have been severe, and they have not only been physical, like illness or hospitalization, or financial, like shutting down of businesses, but also psychological, like anxiety and loneliness. And if you can't hear me, please just tell me. So the rationale, so Chatterjee and Chauhan emphasize a need to explore the psychological effects of COVID on the essential workers and people who had to go outside to work. And they also suggested a need to examine the coping strategies used by the workers, because they believed that adaptive coping strategies would reduce the symptoms of PTSD that were maintained due to COVID or lockdown. So the aim of the study was to explore the correlation between subjective well-being and the coping strategies, and to compare how these variables were different in people who work from home and the people who work from office. So subjective well-being is defined as in two ways. The first is the cognitive component, which includes life satisfaction and the cognitive evaluation of a person's quality of life. So is my life good right now? Okay, and then the second component is the affective component, which focuses on how I'm feeling. Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling pessimistic? Like that. Coping mechanism. So coping mechanism, we use the model of Lazarus and Folkman, which differentiated coping mechanism into adaptive and maladaptive. Adaptive coping mechanism are those which are helpful to us, like suppose seeking emotional support from people, and maladaptive coping mechanisms are those which are harmful for us, like suppose denial or venting out. So the sample included people who worked in banks in Mumbai in the age range of 28 to 48-year-olds, and they included 100 people who work from home and 100 people who had to go to work. So the tools used were to measure the cognitive component of life satisfaction. I used Satisfaction with Life Scale by Diner, and for the affective component, I used PANAS by Watson and Clark. And for coping mechanism, I use the brief inventory, Cope by Carver. So if we can see, so my table, sorry, I'm sorry. So this is a table to differentiate the subjective well-being and coping mechanism in people who work from office and home. And we can see from the results that the cognitive well-being of people who work from home was higher, as well as was the affective well-being. So people who worked from home had a higher well-being than people who worked from office, and people who worked from home used adaptive coping mechanisms, like they were seeking emotional support rather than people who worked from office. And the second table was to find a relationship between subjective well-being and coping strategies. Now the results say that, I'm sorry, yes, a positive correlation was seen between subjective well-being and adaptive coping mechanism, and a negative correlation, so people who had a greater subjective well-being used adaptive coping mechanism, and a negative correlation was found between subjective well-being and maladaptive coping mechanism. So these are the results of my study. And the further studies can explore how our home environment played a role in the well-being, because since my study was not qualitative, it can also explore which personality traits influence people to have a better subjective well-being, and also what type of instrumental coping mechanisms that people use, like the people engage in activities, or if new hobbies, how did they affect him. So my study, so future studies can have a qualitative exploration of these facts. And yeah, that's all. So thank you. I hope you could hear me. Hello?
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Okay.
Next name we have Dr. Sheikh Musa Razzaq, Maulana Azad College, Aurangabad, Maharashtra. Research paper title is Travelogues as the Source of Deccan History.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir. You are. Continue, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
PPT
sir, you are
screen?
visible. Go ahead,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Present your paper.
Can you see my PPT presentation, sir?
No, not
PPT
yet, sir. Please share your screen. Sharad.
Now, sir? Now?
Yes, sir.
Now, can you see my PPT presentation, sir?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, sir. The title of my paper is Travelogues as the Source of Deccan History. First of all, good afternoon to all. My name is Dr. Sheikh Musa Razzaq, Assistant Professor in History, Maulana Azad College, Aurangabad, Maharashtra. I am very thankful to Kankoli College, Coordinator Dr. Somnath Kadam sir, and Session in charge Prakash Vankade sir, to give me the opportunity to present my research paper. Travelogues are the accounts written by travelers, which give us the information about their experiences from the visit or from the voyage to the different country from their native land. Also, we can say travelogues play an important role in reconstruction of history. The problem or the selection of my topic for this paper is how the travelogues or the record which experienced by the travelers in different countries, different from their native land, give us the information about social history, political history, economic history, cultural history, etc. These travelogues are also, the accounts written by travelers in the form of diaries, in the form of letters, in the form of records, had been maintained by their officers, or the companions. Many travelers visited India during the ancient period and during medieval period. In ancient period, we can say Megasthenes, who was ambassador of Seleucus Nicator in Patliputra, the court of Chandragupta Maurya, and another travelers, for example, Yuan Fahian, who came from China to India to study the Buddhism. These all travelers written their material, their experiences in their travel accounts or travelogues, which give us the information about ancient Indian history, medieval Indian history. In the term of methodology, I have done my paper by using the primary sources and secondary sources in the historical method, including the translations and the edited versions of the travel accounts from foreign universities or from reputed publication houses like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, etc. In Bahmani Empire and or in Deccan Sultanates, Adil Shahi, Qutub Shahi, Badid Shahi, Imad Shahi, and Nizam Shahi of Ahmednagar, we got information from very Urdu, Persian, Arabic, Marathi, and regional language, vernacular inscriptions written under and archaeological sources like that. But in this paper, I focus on I have focused on the foreign travelogues, which give us information about medieval Deccan, especially from Bahmani Empire and Deccan Sultanate. Which is some scholars neglected these sources, or some scholars like Yazdani, Naeem, Professor Naeem, P.M. Joshi, A.R. Kulkarni, which collected and used in their research. In this paper, I have chosen some travelers who wrote about Deccan history. First is Afanasi Nikitin. He was from Russia and he came to India in Bahmani Deccan period in 16th century. And he wrote Voyage Beyond the Three Seas in Russian language, and the translation of his account, Voyage Beyond the Three Seas, published in French and later in English in 19th century. He visited between 1466 to 1469 during Bahmani Empire. He came from Tver town in Russia. He crossed the Caspian Sea of North Iran and reached to Hormuz port of Persian Gulf. And from Hormuz port to he came to Chaul port in Konkan, in west coast of our Deccan or our Indian subcontinent. And he enjoyed the Chaul port, Dabhol port, and he also visited Cambay of south coast of Gujarat, and he visited Junnar Fort in Bahmani Empire, then Daulatabad, Bidar, and some part of Bahmani Empire's Deccan region. And he explains his experience and his visit to Bahmani court in his travelogue. He met to Asad Khan, the noble of Junnar Fort under Bahmani Empire, and also he explained the experience about the narrative. He narrated the experience about the Vijayanagara and Bahmani conflicts and the military organizations of both kingdom or empires in Deccan.
Sir, please conclude your paper.
Yes, okay, sir. And also he explained the socio-economic and cultural features of the Deccan during Bahmani Empire. And in short, I have to reach conclusion. In conclusion, we can say the foreign travelers give us the information about Deccan history or particular land which they visited, and it is very important to our methodology of historiography and historiographic research in the Indian history. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present my paper in this conference. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir. Next research scholar we have Thomas Casey from St. Stephen's College, Thanjavur, Kottayam, Kerala. The title of research paper is A Study on Rural Development in Wetland Regions, special reference to Kuttanad in Kerala. Are you connected, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, all of you. Respected chair and my dear participants. Myself, Thomas Casey, assistant professor, St. Stephen's College, Ulavur. The title of my research paper is A Study on Rural Development in Wetland Regions, special reference to Kuttanad in Kerala. Am I audible, sir? Sir, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you
Yes,
are
sir.
audible.
Riverside
Yeah.
Yes, riverside wetlands have been recognized as valuable and most suitable for food production. India, having 68.8% of the rural people, are living with subsistence farming and experience seasonal and disguised unemployment. The slow growth of new jobs compared with the large workforce exerts pressure on rural youth. Sustainability of ecosystem and the rural people who depend on wetland resources for their livelihood are equally significant. This study focuses on the changing socio-economic status of Kuttanad wetland community in Kerala. Though 73.3% of the respondents depend on paddy for their livelihood, fails to meet a decent living. Moreover, regular environment shocks are additional risk of uncertainty of life in the region. The study recommends the livelihood diversification through local community participation is necessary to reduce the rural and environmental vulnerability of the wetland community. The objective and methodology of the study. The study aims to examine the changing socio-economic status of Kuttanad wetland community in Kerala. Both primary and secondary data is used in this study. Information retrieved from 360 household heads using interview schedules used here. Stratified random sampling is used to collect samples from the study area. Both scientific observation and participatory discussions conducted for relevant data collection. Secondary data collected from the publications of Ramsar Convention, National Wetland Atlas prepared by ISRO, and so on. Diagrams, tables, and percentage method are used in data interpretation. The type-wise wetland distribution of Kerala states that there are 7 main categories of wetlands. River and stream wetlands consist of 41% of the total wetland area. Lagoons consist of 24%. Reservoir barrages 17%. Waterlogged wetland 13%. 2% of wetlands are lakes and ponds. 2% tanks or ponds. Sand and beach consist of 1%. Again, Kerala consists of 14 districts. Among these 14 districts, Kottayam, Alappuzha, and Pathanamthitta consist of the Kuttanad region. The socio-economic status of Kuttanad. The present Kuttanad wetland zone includes 10 taluks under 3 districts of Alappuzha, Pathanamthitta, and Kottayam. Kuttanad has a distinct of having rice fields that lie below sea level between 4 to 10 feet. As per the research estimate, only 60% of the paddy fields in Kuttanad are cultivated now, and about 11% of the land remains as cultivable wasteland, whereas the others continue as fallow. As per a rough estimate, more than 50% of the paddy cultivation in Kuttanad is carried out on leased land. Farming on the lease has its ecological impact also. The unscrupulous application of chemical fertilizers and plant protection chemicals are contaminating the cultivated fields and the entire wetland of Kuttanad. Though majority of the households depend paddy farming as their main livelihood, it is insufficient to meet the annual expenditure of the family. This study shows that 73.3% of the households depend on paddy for their livelihood. Salaried people consist of 3.3%, comparatively least in number. 37.8% of the family in the study area are having monthly income between 5,000 and 10,000. Only 1.1% are having a monthly income above 50,000. Paddy farmers are comparatively marginal, small, and semi-medium farmers with less than 4 hectares of operational holdings of land. Only 6.7% of the households possessed more than. Yes, I shall conclude, sir. The conclusion. The presence of Vembanad Lake makes Kuttanad under wetland region. Though food security in the state of Kerala is partly ensured with the farming operations in this region, paddy farming fails to meet a decent living. Subdivision and fragmentation of holdings together with increased cost of cultivation made the paddy farming uneconomic, and they do not enjoy the benefit of economies of scale evident from the small size operational holdings of land. Moreover, the inhabitants of the region possess a rich culture and heritage. The unique geographical and environmental settings make the life uncertain. Moreover, wise use of wetland resources recommended by Ramsar Convention is known to some sections of the community, and they diversified their livelihood. The region and its people directly and indirectly protects the sustainability of the country as a whole, and Kerala and Kuttanadi in particular. This study calls attention to the wise use of wetland resources and to enhance the livelihood diversification of the people and ensure their sustainable living. The main recommendations: though Kuttanadi is environmentally vulnerable, it offers a significant scope for the sustainability of the region through wise use of wetland. Paddy farming needs to be protected at any cost, as it ensures food security and flood control in the region. Cooperative farming and consolidation of holdings need to be promoted to get the benefit of economies of scale. The risk of uncertainty of life in the region shall be shared by the entire country by ensuring royalties to the Kuttanadi community of the final livelihood diversification through local community participation is necessary to reduce the rural and environmental vulnerability of wetland region. Moreover, the wise use of wetland resources shall be the wise policy of the policy makers. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present the paper. Thank you, sir.
Next research scholar we have. Thank you. Dr. Vinita Kamath from Kirti College, Mumbai. The research title name is Climate Change Act Now. Ma'am, are you connected with us?
Yeah, sir. Am I audible, sir? Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Present your paper.
Yes, sir. Give me 1 moment. Yes, sir. I'm trying to put my present PPT. Can you share my screen? Can you see my screen? No? Are you able to view the screen?
Not yet, ma'am.
Check, sir. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you able to view the screen, sir? Yeah, thank you so much. My topic is Climate Change Act Now. During the Paris Agreement in 2015, the United Nations has set 17 permanent SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goals, to international cooperation amongst the 193 countries that are part of United Nations in solving economical, social, and cultural and natural types of problems. These are called the SDGs. So we have here 17 SDGs on the screen. Till 2030, we time all these United Nation members, we have a time to achieve these goals. I'm going to focus on goal number 13, that is climate action. This is a review about the climate change. In the recent decades, we have witnessed shifting weather patterns that has affected food production, rising sea levels, and so on. Why this is happening? This is because there is increase in the temperature. If you just look at this particular graph, see from 1900 in this entire century there has been a steady increase in the temperature to almost 0.7 degree 0.7 degree in this entire century. The warming up of the past century has happened, which is almost 8 times more faster than the ice age recovery. So we know that fossil fuel burning, deforestation has led to more and more greenhouse gas emissions like methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, and of course the carbon dioxide. So very few tree remains on the ground to absorb the excess carbon. High atmospheric temperature leads to the melting of the glacier and further increase the sea level rise. Further, oceans, they absorb more carbon dioxide and produce a lot of carbonic acid. Now till since 19th century, it has been observed that almost 30% of the oceans have been acidic. It affects various ecosystems. Quantities of greenhouse gas emissions that are getting emitted out there, they are rising. I mean, they are breaking the new records in entire last 30 lakhs years in compared to last 30 lakhs years. Now, both on the path to raise the global average temperature for more than 3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. So if you just observe this, what has been the climate change for last century here from 1882 to 2000. global temperature has rise almost 0.85 degrees. It affects the grain yield. Of course, the last century, the sea level has been rose for almost 9 centimeters. Then Arctic ice has shrunk almost 1.7 million kilometer per year. So all this has led to the prediction that probably average sea level will rise almost 24 to 30 centimeters by 2065. So many ecosystems like Amazon rainforest, Arctic tundra, coral will be affected. There are few climate changes incidences that I will enlist here. According to the NASA, year 2020 have been the warmest year on record. Antarctica, as I had said already, has seen a lot of ice melting. Australian bushfires. Hello. Australian bush. They have seen that 25.5 million acres have been almost burned. 25,000 very beautiful koalas have been found to be dead. Then various European countries, they have broken their own temperature records. Several high altitudes have seen the fire activity. So much of rainfall also has been observed in few parts of the India, where on others there is severe lack of water has been observed. Various different tropical cyclones were observed. So what is the Paris Agreement 2015? Now, during this Paris Agreement, United Nations, entire international community came together and they made an agreement to keep a global average temperature below the 2 degrees Celsius. So then we have this question in our mind: does the climate change has affected the transmission of the coronavirus? Of course, there is no direct evidence of a climate change, but deforestation has led to the habitat loss worldwide, which has which has forced the animals to migrate, and it has created an opportunity for to create a new host. If we do not take the action here, of course, global temperature to increase beyond degrees Celsius, the climate change will cause the average temperature to change more than 3 degrees Celsius, and the climate change can lead to increase in the yes. So further, I believe we should all take part in this Act Now campaign of a United Nation. And then I'll conclude it here. We have to increase our efforts in terms of investment in renewable energy sources. We must transform our energy industry, agriculture and forest system, so that the average temperature should not increase more than 2 degrees Celsius. There should be public-private sector investment, and particularly in renewable energy sources like solar energy, wind energy, hydro energy, and thus this will help create your climate resilience, ensure cleaner air, great food security, and more livable cities and better health. I'm grateful to you, all the organizers, for allowing me to present my research topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next name we have Gurav Harshada Surendra, Gokte Jogegar College, Ratnagiri. The title of the research paper is Women's Empowerment.
Good afternoon, everyone. माझं नाव हर्षदा सुरेंद्र गुरव, गोगटे जोगेकर कॉलेज. मी भाग 1 ला शिकत आहे. माझ्या संशोधन पेपराचा विषयाचं नाव आहे महिला सक्षमीकरण. त्यात मी ग्रामीण महिला सक्षमीकरणाची गरज का आहे हा विषय घेतला आहे.
Start your video, please.
सर, नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लेम आहे थोडा.
Okay, continue.
भारतासारख्या विकसनशील देशांमध्ये लोकसंख्येच्या बाबतीमध्ये महिलांचा जवळजवळ निम्मा वाटा आहे. त्यामुळे त्यांना विकासाच्या मुख्य प्रवाहाबाहेर ठेवणे अयोग्य आहे. महिलांना सत्ता, संपत्ती आणि संधीची समानता देऊन विकासाच्या मुख्य प्रवाहात आणणे ही आता काळाची गरज बनलेली आहे. देशातील ग्रामीण भागातील महिलांकडे पाहण्याचा दृष्टिकोन हा गरीब, अशिक्षित, अडाणी आणि अंधश्रद्धा व दडपशाहीखाली जीवन जगणारी असा घेतला जातो. त्याचबरोबर त्यांच्याकडे कौशल्याचे प्रमाण कमी असल्यामुळे शहरी भागातील महिलांच्या तुलनेत त्यांचा विकास झालेला दिसत नाही. ग्रामीण भागातील महिलांमध्ये शिक्षणाचे प्रमाण कमी असल्यामुळे मालमत्ता आणि व्यवसायाची मालकी त्यांच्याकडे कमी प्रमाणामध्ये असते. ग्रामीण भागातील महिला या सक्षम व्हाव्यात या दृष्टिकोनातून शासकीय पातळीवर विविध उपाययोजना करण्याचा प्रयत्न चालू आहे, परंतु त्याचा तेवढासा परिणाम झालेला दिसून येत नाही. तर महिला सक्षमीकरण म्हणजे नेमके काय? सत्तावंचित, संधीवंचित महिलांना कोणत्याही भेदभावाशिवाय प्रगती करण्याची संधी देणे म्हणजे महिला सक्षमीकरण होय. महिला स्वतःच्या अस्तित्वाची जाणीव करून देण्यासाठी आज प्रत्येक क्षेत्रात पुरुषाच्या खांद्याला खांदा लावून काम करत आहे. त्यांच्यासाठी तिच्या अंतर्मनातून येणारा आत्मविश्वास आणि धाडस तिला पाठबळ देत आहे. आजही जगातील महिलांना विविध क्षेत्रांमध्ये दुय्यम स्थान दिले जात आहे. महिला सक्षमीकरणामध्ये महिला सक्षमीकरणात महत्वाची बाब म्हणजे तिला माणूस म्हणून जगण्याची संधी देऊन तिला तिचे व्यक्तिमत्व विकसित करण्यात समाजातून प्रोत्साहन मिळावे. महिलांना सक्षमीकरण होण्यासाठी कोणाची भीक नको आहे किंवा कोणाची दया नको आहे, तर त्यांना पुरुषांप्रमाणे समान संधी हवी आहे. यासाठी महिला सक्षमीकरण महत्वाचे ठरते आहे. मानवी हक्कांविषयी अनेक आंतरराष्ट्रीय करारांमध्ये मान्यता मिळून निर्धन आणि निरक्षर राहण्याचे प्रमाण मोठे आहे. कायदे व कल्याण कार्यक्रमाच्या माध्यमातून आर्थिक, सामाजिक, शैक्षणिक आणि राजकीय सर्व क्षेत्रांमध्ये महिलांना पुरुषांच्या बरोबरीने हक्क दर्जा प्रदान करून देणे, विकासासाठी संधी उपलब्ध करून देणे आणि स्त्री पुरुष असमानता नष्ट करणे, या प्रक्रियेला स्त्री सक्षमीकरण असे म्हटले जाते. देशातील एकूण लोकसंख्येच्या जवळपास अर्धी लोकसंख्या ही महिलांची आहे. जागतिकीकरणामुळे शहरी महिलांना शिक्षण आणि रोजगाराच्या विविध संधी मिळाल्या आहेत, परंतु ग्रामीण महिलांना अजूनही शिक्षण, सामाजिक दर्जा, आर्थिक पार्श्वभूमी, राजकीय बाबी इत्यादींमध्ये त्या मागासलेल्याच आहेत. त्यामुळे देशाच्या विकास कार्यामध्ये ग्रामीण भागातील महिलांना समाविष्ट केले जात नाही. ग्रामीण भागातील महिला मुलांचे पालन पोषण आणि संगोपनामध्येच व्यस्त राहतात. कौटुंबिक कामकाजामधून त्यांना फारसा वेळ मिळत नाही. त्यांना त्यांचे मूळ ज्ञान, कौशल्य लघु व्यवसाय निर्मितीसाठी सक्षम बनवणे आवश्यक आहे. ग्रामीण महिलांचे कौटुंबिक आणि समाजातील योगदानामध्ये मोलाचा वाटा आहे, परंतु असे असले तरी त्यांना विकासाच्या संधींमध्ये अतिशय अल्प वाटा मिळालेला आहे. बहुतेक वेळा त्यांना शिक्षण आणि चांगल्या नोकऱ्या, राजकीय व्यवस्थेमध्ये सहभाग, चांगले आरोग्य, निर्णय घेण्यापासून वगळलेच जाते. त्याशिवाय त्यांना शारीरिक, मानसिक, सामाजिक आणि ग्रामीण महिलांना सक्षम करूनच समाज आणि राष्ट्राला बलवान करू शकतो. महिलांना सहभाग आणि संरक्षण, त्यांची आर्थिक उन्नती, त्यांच्या क्षमतांचे संवर्धन आणि सर्वांसाठी अनुकूल वातावरण निर्मिती करावी लागणार आहे. 21व्या शतकातील आधुनिक समाजाने ग्रामीण स्त्रियांकडे निखळ दृष्टीने पाहायला हवे. स्वामी विवेकानंद म्हणतात, स्त्रियांची स्थिती सुधारल्याशिवाय जगाच्या कल्याणाची शक्यता नाही. थँक्यू सर.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, Chandrakant Kamble from Vasundhara Kala Mahavidyalay, Solapur. The title of the research paper is Nakshalwadi Chळवळ Samajशास्त्रीय मूल्यमापन. Are you connected, sir? Chandrakant?
Yes. I thank you for you.
Start your presentation.
कणकवली महाविद्यालय आणि त्यांच्या टीमचे प्रथमतः मी इथं धन्यवाद करतो की अशा कोविडच्या भयंकर परिस्थितीमध्ये सुद्धा त्यांनी ऑनलाईन पद्धतीने इंटरनॅशनल परिषद आयोजित केली. माझ्या शोध निबंधाचं टायटल आहे नक्षलवाद चळवळ आणि त्याचं समाजशास्त्रीय मूल्यमापन. वास्तविकता नक्षलवाद ही चळवळ का उदयास आली याची कारणे किंवा याची सामाजिक पार्श्वभूमी, राजकीय पार्श्वभूमी आणि त्याचबरोबर आर्थिक पार्श्वभूमी आपल्याला समजून घेणं अधिक महत्त्वाचं आहे. नक्षलवाद ही एक सशस्त्र क्रांतीवर आधारलेली चळवळ आहे. या चळवळीचा चेहरा सशस्त्र क्रांतीचा आहे. प्रत्येक चळवळीला विचार प्रणालीचा आधार असतोच. म्हणजे विचार प्रणाली ही कोणत्याही चळवळीच्या बाबतीत येणारी बाब आहे. आणि जे काय आपण सध्या नक्षलवादी चळवळ बघतो, ही नक्षलवाद चळवळ सुद्धा कोणत्या ना कोणत्या वैचारिक प्रणालीवरच आधारलेली आहे. त्यांच्यावर होणारा जो काही अन्याय आहे, त्यांचं जे काही होणारं शोषण आहे, त्या शोषणाच्या विरोधात जाऊन त्यांनी जे काही बंड पुकारलेला आहे, त्या बंडालाच आपण नक्षलवादी चळवळ म्हणण्याचा प्रयत्न करतो. रूढार्थाने नक्षलवादी चळवळीची सुरुवात 60व्या शतकात झाली आणि म्हणजे इसवी सन 60च्या शतकात झाली. 1937 मध्ये कान्हू सन्याल आणि चारू मुजुमदार यांच्या नेतृत्वाखाली झालेली ही चळवळ 1920च्या दशकात उदयाला आलेल्या कम्युनिस्ट पक्षामध्ये असलेले दिसून येतात. सांगण्याचं तात्पर्य आहे की नक्षलवादी चळवळीच्या विस्ताराबरोबरच या चळवळीने काही प्रश्नही निर्माण केलेले आहेत. त्यांच्यावर जे काही शोषण होत आहे, त्या शोषणाला त्यांनी शस्त्राचा वार द्यायचं, म्हणजे आपण म्हणतो की काट्यानं काटा काढायचं, तशा पद्धतीची भूमिका नक्षलवाद्यांची असल्यामुळं तो काही मार्ग खऱ्या अर्थानं कायद्यात्मक मार्ग नाही असंही आपल्याला म्हणता येतं. पण त्यांच्या पुढे कोणता मार्ग नसल्यामुळं त्यांनी हा सशस्त्र क्रांतीचा मार्ग स्वीकारल्याचं आपल्याला दिसून येतं. आणि बऱ्याच जणांच्या बाबतीत आपल्याला असं दिसून येतं की नक्षलवादी चळवळीबद्दल आपल्याला बरेचसे भ्रम आहेत की नक्षलवादी चळवळ का उदयास आली किंवा कशी आली, तर त्यांच्यावर जे काही शोषण होत आहे त्या शोषणातून ही चळवळ खऱ्या अर्थानं ही उदयास आलेली आहे. आज नक्षलवादी चळवळ उग्र स्वरूपाची झाली आहे. हिंसाचाराने क्रांती घडवल्यावरच त्यांचा सर्वांचा विश्वास आहे. यातूनच वेगवेगळ्या ठिकाणी स्थानिक जनतेला स्थानिक प्रश्नावरून भडकावण्याचे काम सुरू केले जाते. जमीनदाराच्या भीषण शोषणाच्या विरोधात लढे उभे केले जातात आणि नक्षलवादी गटाने ही चळवळ देशभर चालवली आहे. केवळ महाराष्ट्रातील गडचिरोली भागातच नक्षलवादी चळवळ आहे असं नाही, तर संपूर्ण देशामध्ये आसाम असो, ओरिसा असो किंवा पश्चिम बंगालचा भाग असो, या प्रत्येक ठिकाणी नक्षलवादी चळवळीनं आपलं विस्तारानं स्वरूप प्रकट केलेलं आहे. नक्षलवादी कधीच नव्हते, पण अंतर्गत सुरक्षेला जी काही हमी बसली नाही तेव्हा या खऱ्या अर्थानं या सुरक्षेला विस्तारूत देऊन या नक्षलवादी चळवळीनं आपली कार्यप्रणाली प्रकट केलेली आहे हे आपल्याला दिसून येतं. चंद्रपूर महाराष्ट्राच्या बाबतीत जर आपण विचार केला तर चंद्रपूर, गडचिरोली, भंडारा जिल्हा इतके बस्थान बसलेले आहे की या ठिकाणी सर्वसामान्य लोकांना सामान्य जीवन जगणे सुद्धा भीतीदायक वाटतं. मग अशा परिस्थितीमध्ये नक्षलवाद्याचा सामना करून चालणार नाही, तर नक्षलवाद्याला आपल्या बरोबर घेऊन त्यांची समीक्षण करून त्यांचं समुपदेशन करून या लोकांचं समुपदेशन झाल्याशिवाय ही चळवळ आपल्याला आटोक्यात आणता येणार नाही. नक्षलवाद संपेल, पण कधी संपेल, तर त्यासाठी आपल्याला अचूक व ठोस उपाय करावे लागणार आहेत. निरनिराळ्या राज्यामध्ये अधूनमधून हिंसाचाराचा अच्छाद मांडणे हे काही नक्षलवाद्याचे कृत्य आपल्याला दिसून येत आहेत, परंतु हे आपल्याला थांबवायचं आहे. त्यांचं समुपदेशन घडवायचं आहे. त्यांच्यावर झालेला अत्याचार, त्यांच्यावर झालेलं शोषण हे आपल्याला थांबवायचं आहे आणि आपल्याला त्यांना कायद्याच्या दृष्टिकोनातून खऱ्या अर्थानं त्यांना आपल्याला मदत करायची आहे. त्यांना चांगल्या पद्धतीचं हेल्पनेस करायचं आहे. असं जर झालं, नक्षलवाद्यांच्या भावना जर आपण समजून घेतलो आणि सरकार जर त्यांच्या भावना समजून घेण्यामध्ये खरोखरच यशस्वी ठरलं, तर नक्षलवादाची ही जी काही सध्याची विस्तृतवादी चळवळ निर्माण झालेली आहे ही थांबणं शक्यच आहे. पण त्यांच्या भावना समजून घेणं आपल्याला अधिक महत्वाचं आहे. नक्षलवाद
कन्क्लूड युअर पेपर.
वास्तविकता नक्षलवादास आपली सामाजिक स्थिती कारणीभूत ठरली आहे. एका बाजूला अन्याय असेल तर दुसऱ्या बाजूला प्रतिकार ही आपोआपच उभा राहतो. म्हणून नक्षलवाद्यांचं
समारोप करा. पुढचा सेशन आहे अजून आम्हाला.
ओके, तर या बाबतीत अशा पद्धतीने आपल्याला
Next, we have Pradnya Pradeep Tambe from Gokte Jogaikar College, Ratnagiri. The title of the research paper is भारताची कर्ज समस्या आणि व्यवस्थापन. Please cover your paper in 2-3 minutes, within 2 or 3 minutes. Are you connected with us, Pradnya Tambe, ma'am?
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, ma'am.
माझे नाव प्रज्ञा प्रदीप तांबे.
मॅडम व्हिडिओ स्टार्ट कराल का?
नाही नेटवर्क नसेल तर
नेट प्रॉब्लेम.
ओके मॅडम, कंटिन्यू करा.
माझे नाव प्रज्ञा प्रदीप तांबे, MA फर्स्ट इकॉनॉमिक्स डिपार्टमेंट. मी गोगटे जोगेकर महाविद्यालय रत्नागिरी महाविद्यालयाची विद्यार्थिनी आहे. माझ्या रिसर्च पेपरचं नाव आहे भारताची कर्ज समस्या आणि व्यवस्थापन. ज्याप्रमाणे व्यक्ती किंवा कुटुंबांना कर्ज उभारावी लागतात, त्याचप्रमाणे देशाचा कारभार चालवण्यासाठी सरकारलाही कर्ज द्यावी लागतात. त्या सार्वजनिक कर्ज असे म्हणतात. अलीकडच्या सरकारच्या खर्चात प्रचंड प्रमाणात वाढ झाली आहे. हा खर्च भागवण्यासाठी कर व इतर नेहमीच्या मार्गाने उत्पन्न कमी पडते, तेव्हा सरकारला विविध मार्गाने कर्ज उभारावी लागतात. ही कर्ज जागतिक बँक, आंतरराष्ट्रीय नाणेनिधी, वित्त संस्था यांच्याकडून सरकार कर्ज उभारते. परंतु आज सरकारवरील जागतिक कर्जाचा बोजा हा खूप मोठ्या प्रमाणात वाढलेला आहे. प्रत्येक देशाची अर्थव्यवस्था हा त्या देशाचा कणा असतो आणि त्या देशाची बँकिंग व्यवस्था किती सबळ आहे यावरून त्या देशाची अर्थव्यवस्था किती सशक्त आहे हे लक्षात येते. परंतु गेल्या वर्षात भारत हा अणुउत्पादित पुनर्रचित कर्जाच्या गर्तेत सापडला आहे. माझ्या संशोधनाचे उद्दिष्ट पुढील प्रमाणात की फर्स्ट आहे भारताची जागतिक कर्ज समस्या आणि त्याच्या व्यवस्थापनाचा अभ्यास करणे. नेक्स्ट आहे COVID-19 नंतर भारतात जागतिक कर्ज क्षेत्राचा अभ्यास करणे. त्यानंतर भारताच्या जागतिक कर्ज समस्येच्या व्यवस्थापनाचा अभ्यास करणे. माझ्या रिसर्च पेपरची गृहीतके आहेत. भारत हा अणुउत्पादित पुनर्रचित कर्जाच्या गर्तेत सापडला आहे. COVID-19 नंतर खूप मोठ्या प्रमाणावर भारतावरील जागतिक कर्ज हे वाढलेले दिसून येते. जर आपण भारतावर किती कर्ज आहे याबद्दल बघितले तर भारत मार्च 2020 रोजी संपलेल्या तिमाही चलन मूल्यांकनाचा परिणाम आणि व्यापारी कर्ज आणि अनिवासी भारतीय NRI मध्ये भारताचे परकीय 558.5 अब्ज डॉलर्सवर पोहोचले आहे. मार्च 2020 अखेर देशाचे एकूण बाह्य कर्ज हे 2.8% वाढून 558.5 अब्ज डॉलर्सवर पोहोचले आहे. त्यातच आता भर म्हटलं तर कोरोना संकट ज्याने पूर्ण जगाला वेढलं आहे. या कोरोनाच्या संकटात जगातील अनेक देशांच्या अर्थव्यवस्थेवर खूप मोठा परिणाम झाला आहे. भारताच्या अर्थव्यवस्थेला सुद्धा खूप मोठा दणका बसला असून आता जागतिक रेटिंग एजन्सी मूडीजने देखील धोक्याची घंटा वाजवली आहे. त्यामुळे कोरोना संकटाच्या पार्श्वभूमीवर भारताने जागतिक बँक आणि आशियाई विकास बँक कडून खूप मोठे कर्ज घेतले आहे. मायक्रो, लघु आणि मध्यम उद्योगांना मदत करण्यासाठी जागतिक बँकेने 75 कोटी अमेरिकन डॉलर्सचे कर्ज देण्याचे जाहीर केले. त्यानंतर भारतातील शिक्षण सुधारणेच्या कामासंदर्भात सुमारे 3,700 कोटी रुपयांचे कर्ज मंजूर झाले आहे. या व्यतिरिक्त मागासवर्गीय आणि गरीब घटकांसाठी जागतिक बँकेने या साथीच्या वेळी 7,500 कोटी रुपयांच्या खर्चास मान्यता दिली. जागतिक बँकेने गेल्या वर्षभरात सर्वाधिक कर्ज हे भारताला उपलब्ध करून दिले आहे. सामाजिक तसेच आरोग्य क्षेत्राबरोबर आंतरराष्ट्रीय अर्थसहाय्याचा लाभ देशातील लघु, सूक्ष्म व मध्यम उद्योगांना देखील झाला आहे. परंतु हे सर्व असलं तरी भारतावरील कर्जाचा बोजा हा मोठ्या प्रमाणात
conclude your paper.
माझ्या रिसर्च पेपरची निष्कर्ष अशी आहेत की भारताची जागतिक कर्ज समस्या आणि भारत हा अणुउत्पादित पुनर्रचित कर्जाच्या गर्तेत सापडला आहे. कोरोना पाश्चात जागतिक कर्ज हे खूप मोठ्या प्रमाणात वाढले आहे. भविष्यात कर्जाचे महाप्रचंड प्रमाण पाहता कर्जाची परतफेड ही अत्यंत अवघड समस्या दिसून येते. आणि चौथा आहे देशातील बँकांचे आर्थिक आरोग्य सुधारणे आवश्यक आहे आणि त्यासाठी रिझर्व्ह बँक ऑफ इंडियाने बँकांवर नियंत्रण ठेवून त्याच्या कर्जाचे व्यवस्थापन करणे गरजेचे आहे. तेव्हाच आपला देश कर्जाच्या बोजातून बाहेर येऊ शकेल. थँक्स.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Dr. Badruddin from PES RSN College of Arts and Science, Ponda, Goa. The title of the research paper is Information Revolution and Changing Character of International Relations. Are you connected, sir?
Yes, I'm audible now.
Yes, are you audible?
Very good afternoon to all of you. My topic, Information Revolution and Changing Character of International Relations, is a very controversial and debated topic. Basically, during the age of globalization and economic liberalization, this paper has two set of objectives. First, how to examine the importance of information revolution for ongoing development in the global system and assess the information revolution as how it is playing a very important role to redesign and restructure the classical theories of international relations. The data has been extensively collected from secondary sources. Background of the subject. Historically, international relations was conventionally controlled and supervised by limited source of information till 1990s. However, the impact of information revolution in the beginning of 20th century witnessed major changes in global system. The impact of information revolution, which address the set of computer generated system, coded instructions, software programming, and data access. Comparatively, information revolution remains the fastest means of problem solution in the contemporary global system. Historically speaking, the First and Second World War were primarily conventional in character. After the Second World War, the emergence of bipolar international system controlled by USA and USSR as the two superpowers. During the Cold War phase, major changes took place in the international policies pertaining to military alliance like NATO and Warsaw Pact, bloc politics, ideological differences between the East and the West, Cold War rivalry, and disarmament policies for the development. These are only by way of reference only, as there are hundreds of more important areas which are integral to international system. For example, the emergence and influence of information revolution, particularly during the post-Cold War phase after 1990s. The traditional character of international relations structurally, ideologically, and politically changed. And the perception of classical thinkers either became obsolete or outdated. The emergence of China as an economic superpower, with several allied powers like South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, including India. But the Chinese information revolution model for economic development became the example for the whole world. No option but to redesign and restructure the outdated classical theories like realism, idealism, and Marxism. And as such, the international revolution was redesigned within the broader parameters of information revolution, be it cross-border terrorism, energy security, war and peace policies, environmental laws, intelligence system, disarmament drives, regional cooperation, international law, diplomacy, local warfare, and even economic nationalism. Apart from these facts, the information revolution is also a reality in supervising various global alternatives like foreign policy decision makings, activities of non-state actors like Greenpeace, multinational corporations, NGOs, transnational agencies, and even research and development bodies. There is hardly any aspect of international relation which remain untouched by information revolution. In the findings of the paper, both information revolution as well as international relations are coherent and interdependent on each other. Hence, the coordination between information revolution and international relations need to be understood in a multi-dimensional perspective. But it is certain that the future course of action in international relations will be virtually shaped.
Kindly conclude your paper, sir.
Will be virtually shaped and determined by international system. In short, I would like to say that information revolution is a very important factor to understand the ongoing changes in the international relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next research scholars we have Jagdish B. Sapkale, Varu L. Rathod, Nilesh K. Susware, Pradeep S. Doshi. They are presenting jointly paper from Shivaji University, Kolhapur. The paper title is Impact of Saltwater Intrusion on the Agricultural Land of Coastal Tract and Investigation along Malwan Coast, Maharashtra.
Good afternoon, all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Good afternoon again. Myself, Dr. Varu Lakshman Rathod, Department of Geography, Kankoli College, Kankoli, and my guide is Professor Dr. Jagdish Balwant Sapkale, Department of Geography, Shivaji University, Kolhapur, and my research colleague is Nilesh Susware and Vinaya Susware from Gokuli College, Kolhapur. My research topic is impact of saltwater intrusion on the agricultural land of coastal tract and investigation along Malwan Coast, Maharashtra. Introduction to my topic. In the present study, importance has been given to the impact of salinity on the agricultural land of the coastal villages. The study has attempted using GIS and remote sensing techniques. In the study area, it has been that saline water is entering towards the inland agriculture land from the seawater side. The seawater is coming through the estuaries and tidal inland and spread in the agricultural land. Significance of the study. The present research work aims to estimate the saline land and land use land cover area in the study area. The land use and land cover analysis have been attempted using GIS and remote sensing techniques. Aims and objective of my study area. The aim of the proposed research work is to study the impact of salinity on the agricultural land of the coastal villages. And objective of the study area is, first objective is to study the land use land cover characteristics of the study area. Second is to estimate the saline area in the study area using GIS and remote sensing techniques. Third objective is to study the effect of salinity on the coastal agriculture. Study area of my study area is location of study area. The Sindhudurga district is located in the extreme south of western Maharashtra. To its east, there is Sahyadri range, and that is near to it is Kolhapur district. To the west of Sindhudurga, Arabian Sea is present, and to its south, Goa and Karnataka state comes. Ratnagiri is the north of Sindhudurga. Latitude of my study area is 16 degree 4 minute north to 73 degrees 27 minute east, and 16 degree 4 minute north to 73 degree 27 minute east. Methodology of my study area is, the present methodology has adopted for the research work is, first is field work and field survey. It was decided to conduct detailed field survey to identify the salinity affected area in the study area. Second method is land use land cover. During the field survey, saline area characteristics in the terms of vegetation, soil, rock, structure, forest, cover area have been identified. And third is using remote sensing and GIS techniques. Using GIS software, ArcGIS, ERIDAS, Imagine 9.1, Landsat, TM satellite, etc. Discussion of my study area is, salinity has caused major harmful effects on agriculture area. Rural and urban population of India directly or indirectly depend on agriculture. The research is paying attention on the vulnerable of soil and water salinity of agriculture crop in this study area. This present study thus verified that the use of the remote sensing tools and image enhanced techniques are suitable for such type of soil salinity identification. Conclusion of conclusion: the superiority of soil in the study area is on the way of degradation. The primary cause of agriculture soil quality arise from salinization, water logging, and infiltration of saline water from adjacent sea and tidal inland. There is an adverse effect of such process on crop productivity of the study area. The major crop in this region is rice, but the yearly yield of rice is decreasing day by day. In view of the serious problem that occurs in the region, there may be an alternative option to change the cropping pattern in the salinity affected areas. GIS-based analysis also gives improved result and effective strategy for the mitigation of such affected coastal zones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Wankhede sir, are you connected, sir? Wankhede sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I would like to request you to share your a few suggestions or views on this session, sir. In 1 to 3 minutes.
International conference on recent trends in social sciences organized by Kankoli College, Kankoli, and organizing secretary Kadam sir, my friend Mahalinge sir, and dear participants. The theme of international conference is recent trends in social sciences. Accordingly, in the first session, there are 12 papers presented by the participants, and these papers we can categorize as gender studies, economics, law, environmental science, management, history, and sociology. In true speed, we find the sociological aspects in the first session. All paper that is presented by Pandit Madam, titled Women Empowerment, an Essential Way to Achieve the Goal of Social Development. In that they have discussed why empowerment is essential for the social development. We know that empowerment is a broad subject, and within 5 minutes we cannot present this whole topic in limited time, but they have tried to present a good research paper in that way. Then Anand Kasle sir is there. They have sir presented on legal education in India with reference to changing facets of society. In that paper, he discussed the legal education and changing his nature in India. But what I find, sir ignored the interrelate that how societal changes bring the change in the legal education. Means what society is going to change, but how that changing society is going to link it with legal education, that I find missing in his paper. And Ramchandra Gaikwad sir have presented their paper on literature and movement. Literature, we know that that is inspired by various movements, but this research paper mainly confined with Dalit movement. The Dalit literature, how inspired the movement, that thing he has discussed in his research paper. And Ishita Goyal ma'am, that is very good research paper presented by her, and good primary data she has collected, and the conclusion which she derives, that is very apt in the corona-like period. Then Sheikh Razak sir have been presented the paper on travelogues as the source of Deccan history, and he also collected the data, that is the foreign travelogue, and by using that how history is constructed, that he explained in his research paper. And Thomas Casey sir presented the paper on rural development at wetland region with special references to Kuttanad in Kerala. The conclusion of that is very apt. If they do the diversification in the livelihood, that can be a major, what we can say, that key resource for the livelihood. Then Climate Change Act now, that is presented by the Vanita Kamath madam, and that is review-like paper. And she said that this is now proper time we have to take the action against climate change. And another paper, that is the Harshada madam, they have presented the paper on women empowerment, how empowerment is needed for the development of society, that she has discussed in his paper. And Nakshalwadi Chalwal Samashastri Mulemapan, that is done by the Chandrakant Kamble sir. He discussed the Naxalite movement causes, impact, and he has given some suggestion also. And that is the one student, Bhartaji Kar Samasya and Vyavasthapan, she has presented on that. That is the Prajna Tambe. And next, that is the information revolution and changing character of international relations, that is presented by the Badruddin sir. That is very good research paper presented by him. Environmental effect of Varna Dam in the context of river shift and salinity problem, that is Rathod sir also presented very good paper in the session. I want to congratulate all the participants who have been presented their paper in the first session. And also I congratulate the college who have organized efficiently this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable time, and thank you for being with us. Now I invite Dr. Maruti Sawan sir, Assistant Professor, Department of History, to propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, sir. Start, sir. Sir, unmute yourself. Sir, unmute yourself.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, all of you. Respected dais, respected sir, honorable chairperson of this session, Professor Dr. P.G. Wankhede sir, Head of Department of Economics, Punyashlok Ahilya Devi Holkar, Solapur University, Solapur, Maharashtra. It's my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks behalf of the organizing committee, Kankoli College, Kankoli, Maharashtra. I sincerely thank all the researcher and honorable members who attend the event. This event, I am sincerely thankful to respected Professor Dr. P.G. Wankhede sir for sharing his valuable views and motivational tips in the today session. Thank you to organizing committee for giving me an opportunity for vote of thanks. Once again, thank you one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all the research scholars who have presented their papers and actively participate in the conference. Now, I would like to inform that today we are starting with plenary session 2, and for this plenary session we have two eminent resource persons